first exam is scheduled for a week from Thursday. You should be looking over the review questions and coming up with some things that will help you in your study. Today we're going to talk about Romanticism and then also talk about Berlioz and the Symphonie Fantastique. What I plan to do is to finish Berlioz on Thursday. We'll talk about Brahms. And on Thursday, I'll also give you just a practice listening test, so you'll know what it's going to be like. So go ahead and, be organizing your listening. So the things that you need to be able to identify are the themes that are on the theme sheet. So be sure that you've downloaded that from the website. Use that as your study guide. And be able to write out the name of the composition and then the particular movement and form. So you need to be able to, identify the movement, but not the particular theme. So I won't make you identify as the A theme or the B theme or whatever. All right, but we'll go over that on Thursday so you have an idea of what to expect and kind of see where you're at with things. So it's really important that you study more than you think you need to study for the first test to get off to a good start, and then you get a feel for things. So go ahead and start to learn the dates of composers' lives, the date of composition, and if you have questions, be sure that you bring those up. So a week from today, then we'll do a review for the test. So go ahead and start to be thinking about that and kind of pulling things together. All right, the first thing that I want to do is just to talk for a moment about the Heiligenstadt Testament. So what is that work? Taylor, what's Heiligenstadt Testament?
It was a letter that Beethoven wrote to his brothers. He was kind of, at the end of his rope, didn't really know what to do, and he was contemplating suicide.
Okay. Do you know the date that was?
I'm not for sure.
1802.
Okay.
So it's at that point where Beethoven's style is evolving. It's the point at which his works become just that much more emotionally intense. And you can really see the beginning of Romanticism with these middle period Beethoven works. So they're really important for the 19th century. A couple of concepts that you should have in mind with this letter is the fact that Beethoven made the statement that if it wasn't for his music and for his obligation to compose everything that he had within him to bring that forth, that he would have committed suicide. So that, his art was compensation for the shortcomings of his life with all the conflict that he was dealing with. And it's something which provided this sense of impetus for work and for continuing to struggle with his fate. So So on the website, be sure you go to the tab that says Translations and click on that. And if you haven't read this letter yet, go ahead and read it. It's about 2 pages long. And you get a feel for what Beethoven was going through. So this idea of art as refuge is an important 19th century concept. He also makes the statement to his brothers that teach your children that virtue and art are what bring true happiness, not money. So, as I mentioned before, this was something that actually was never mailed. You know, it was just found in his possessions by his assistant. But Beethoven had preserved it intentionally and kept it, you know, in a place where, you know, it wouldn't be destroyed. All right, and looking at then the music of the 19th century, this term romantic describes this era, this 19th century music. And it's the term itself is something that comes from the idea of a romance. And a romance is an epic tale that is from the medieval era, that has to do with a heroic person who is on a quest, typically. So it's something like the Song of Roland. So if you just go Wikipedia Song of Roland, read about what that's about, that's a typical romance. So it has to do with something that's long ago and far away, something that is a fictional tale, and so something that's very remote from the present. And so the 19th century was very much with this idea of fantasy and fiction. So So this Song of Roland is the oldest surviving example of French literature. It's a poem that's about 4,000 lines long, and it survives in several different sources. But it has to do with a battle in 8th century during the reign of Charlemagne. And so this idea of long ago and the idea of something that's far away. We'll see the idea of exoticism being a really attractive topic in the 19th century. So something that is legendary, fictitious. These epic tales were really popular in the 19th century. And that's in contrast to the previous century, the Enlightenment, in which you had this idea of rational thought. So the whole idea of the irrational was what was popular in the 19th century. So, whereas the 18th century was influenced by the ancient Greek architecture, the idea of balance and proportion and symmetry, the 19th century artists and um, general sensibilities of that era were identifying with the Gothic era. And so if you look at the architecture of the 11th through like the 14th century, and you think of like, you know, medieval castles. So if you think of, you know, Ludwig II's castle, which is what, like Disney World, you know, that's modeled on that. You know, it has these irregular designs. And so it's not bilaterally symmetrical. And so the medieval period is what they were attracted to. All right, so some other important basic characteristics have to do with certain traits like being attracted to nature, and so you see lots of references to nature and nature scenes in the visual arts, in the poetry of the era. You also see attraction to the supernatural, so lots of references to supernatural spirits. We're going to look at an art song by Schubert, which is a setting of the Goethe poem Erl King, which is a legendary tale of this king of the elves, who's a sinister character who will appear to someone, and if Erl King touches that person, then they'll die. So we'll see this, that there's supernatural references in the Berlioz Symphonie Fantastique in the last movement. Another important characteristic is the sense of yearning in the music, and it's this yearning for this unattainable, idealistic goal. And so that leads to this sense of, you know, ultimate not being able to, you know, have fulfillment. And so there's a certain kind of melancholy about the 19th century, and so you can see this in a lot of the poetry. So these are some general characteristics. We see that in the 19th century that it's the beginning of music conservatories in Europe. So this is the age where the middle class really expands, where you have the idea of public concerts and the whole spectacle of the virtuoso and the public concert is something which becomes really, really popular and appealing. So you have artists like the violinist Paganini, the pianist Franz Liszt, who develop these cult-like followings, and who have this heroic element and this huge charisma as performance artists. And so in Europe, then you have the whole conservatory system that begins. So the Paris Conservatory is right around 1800. The conservatories in Vienna and then throughout Europe start to train better performers. And so they are just having to do with performance. And it's something too that separates out performance from the more academic side of music. And so you have, you know, better performance. But the whole idea of the virtuoso is really, really important with Romantic music. So these are just the two who are the most famous, but there's a whole group of performers that are making their living from playing concerts. And the whole music publishing field becomes more and more profitable. You start to have middle-class families that are able to afford musical instruments, and you have manufacturing of pianos, which then becomes a basic status symbol of the middle class, and it becomes the center of the household for middle class Europeans. And so the idea of music education for the average person is just a part of what is regarded as proper education. And so you have then a whole new type of music that evolves. One of the terms that's used to describe this music is salon music. And so you'll see someone like Frédéric Chopin is one of the greatest of the salon artists, but a salon is just like a music room in a mansion, and so in Paris, high society families would present concerts in their homes, and they would have these artists who would come in and perform. And so this type of music that was written for this smaller kind of venue is called salon music. It kind of now has a little bit of a pejorative connotation in that it's lighter. It's maybe not quite as deep in some cases as the music of Beethoven, for example. But it's really Chopin's music is way better than that meaning of salon music. But so in the first half of the 19th century, you see the rise of salon concerts. And then in the second half, you have the whole idea of parlor music, which is music that's definitely lighter and intended just for the average person's home. And so again, this becomes really popular, and music publishers are able to make a lot of money selling this parlor music, which is intended for amateurs. And so you just have a whole, an explosion in the interest in music making in the home, and the rise of the matinee idol. So Paganini had all of these legends that kind of arose, about his abilities and being rumored to have made a deal with the devil to be able to perform, these incredible feats. And he was a tremendous showman. He would come up with all these tricks that he would try to keep secret that were his own way of tuning the